Once we have the basic idea of an input validation loop, there are a couple little variations we can make to that will either help us use it in more situations or maybe will make our lives a little bit easier as programmers in some situations. So in this example, I have basically a menu system. I don't want the user to have to type a lot. So I'm going to give them a list and I'm going to let them choose by typing in just a letter. The basic idea here, I ask them for their input. I check to see if it's not one of the valid choices. I'm going to make them input again, and we're just going to keep going until they give me something that works. Let's test it and see if it is working the way we expect. So my options are A or B. If I type in a J, um, that doesn't uh, that doesn't work. If we type in an A, that does work. And so far, so good. I do see one thing that's just bothering me. I had indented over these lines sort of out of habit, and that indented it on the output. I don't really want that. Okay. More importantly, there is something about the way this works that we might not have thought of. So let's try it one more time. And this time I'm going to type like I. That doesn't work. Okay, I get it. I'm supposed to choose A or B. So I'll choose B. I typed in a capital B and that doesn't work because to a computer, a capital letter is different than a lowercase letter. And my choice only looks for a lowercase a or a lowercase b. So we would call this a case sensitive validation check, right? In other words, case matters. I have to type it in as lowercase. Sometimes that's what we want, but sometimes, actually, oftentimes, that's not what we want. We want to make it easy for the user. They could type in A or B, and I don't care if it's capitalized. So, what we can do, there are actually a few different ways to solve this in most programming languages. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a method that will convert what they have typed in into lowercase letters. Okay. You can also, by the way, you could convert them to uppercase letters. You could use a different way of making the comparison altogether. It doesn't really matter. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert them to lowercase. So there is a string method in Python that will do that. It's dot lower. And I won't show this, but another thing that I'll just catch before we miss it is that I do have two lines where I do this. So I'm going to have to do it in both of those places. And what this does is it says, well, I'm going to call the input method. I'm going to get whatever they've typed in. I'm going to convert it to lowercase. Anything that's a number or a punctuation mark won't be affected. But I'm going to convert all the letters to lowercase. And then I'm going to store that in a variable called choice. Let's run that and see if that works. So O doesn't work, but a capital A should work. All right. And I'm going to trust that a capital B will work as well. And before we move along, I'm going to point out one little thing that, again, sometimes it doesn't matter, sometimes it does, but you'll notice that after they've made their choice, I print out what their selection was. And in the way that I've implemented this now, it says option A is a great selection. And even though I typed in an uppercase A, it has permanently changed that to a lowercase a. Probably that doesn't matter. But what I want you to be thinking about is that I have made a change to some data here. I have taken the data that they typed in and I have permanently changed it to lowercase and then I saved it in a variable. Maybe that's not what I want. I don't know why that wouldn't be what I want, but maybe it's not. So another place I can do this, or another way I can do this, is I can just do the lowercase conversion right as I'm making that comparison to my options. And so I'm going to say now, while choice converted to lowercase is not equal to A and choice converted to lowercase is not equal to B, um, let's ask again. So we'll try that one more time. This one sounds silly, right? And it probably is. It probably doesn't matter most of the time. But I just like to emphasize with students that when we make a decision to change data, that's an important thing to think about. We shouldn't just do that casually. So I tend to use this one. Um, there's an argument to be made that this is less efficient because now I'm having to do this conversion every time. And if it takes the user a million tries to get the right choice. They may have there may be a little time involved in that, not really for practical purposes. Okay, let's talk about another variation that may come into play here. And let's say I have a bunch of different choices. So let's say I'm sorry, I keep messing up my typing here. Let's say I want to offer some different options. And now I've given them 5 choices. So now I've got to come down here and I've got to write a bunch of and statements and operations to this while statement to make it work. And I could do that, right? I could say and choice.lower is not equal to C and choice.nuller is like to D, and it just gets tedious after a while. So there are probably a couple different ways to solve this, but there's one that I want to show you that might be helpful to you. And that is, instead of comparing, saying, is it not equal to that, and checking each one of them, let's say while choice.lower is not not in a list. And so in my list, I can say A, B, C, D, and E. So what this does is it says I'm going to convert the choice that they've input into lowercase letters, and then I'm going to check to see if it is in this particular list, and I've just listed them all. And when I say list, I'm using that deliberately. In Python, the curly braces indicate that this is a list data structure. And so let me clear that and make sure I got everything closed. Let's run it again. And now something like Z shouldn't work, whether it's uppercase or lowercase, but something like D should work, whether it is uppercase or lowercase. So if you have a lot of different options that you want to include, but you can't do a range check, and by a range check, I mean something like, well, if I made this menu numeric and say type in a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I could just say, well, if it's as long as the number is greater than 0 and less than 6, then it's valid. That would be a range check. I need to check against a set of possibilities, and so this allows us to do that. One other thing I'll point out here is I don't have to just declare the set right there. The set could be a variable, the list, excuse me, I was just referring to set in a mathematical sense. This list could be a variable, right? So I could have, maybe I've read in from a file and I put all those options into a list. Maybe I need to use the list elsewhere anyway. You could even have it so that the list is part of how we output our menu, that kind of thing. So I could have a variable name as well. There are a lot of other ways we can validate data. There are a lot of different approaches to it. There are a lot of different techniques, but I just wanted to show you these two really quick so that you have them in your toolbox.